Hi everybody, it's Krish Kandai here and welcome to FAQ. This week we've been looking at wisdom for life in lockdown and beyond. We've been reflecting on the Proverbs. If you've missed other episodes, have a look on my Facebook stream or why not look on YouTube. In fact, while you're at YouTube, please like and subscribe. You'll get a little reminder every time there's a new video and hopefully these will help you. We've been a little bit sharp and pithy this week, 15 minutes, a little bit of insight every day, and I hope they help you. Let us know what you're making of them, which bits have been helpful, which bits you'd like us to change. Today we are looking at Proverbs chapter 3 and then a little bit of reflection on what the Proverbs have to teach us about generosity. And here we go, we're going to dive straight into Proverbs 3. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. A couple of observations. Again, we've got this familial idea that wisdom is something passed down from one generation to another, that wisdom is passed on relationally. It's not just something you get out of a book or that you're searching for online on a website, but there's a relational context, that it's offered as a gift of love. One of the most loving things that we can do for those in our care is to pass on wisdom that we've found out and proved in our own lives, rather than just wisdom that's or ideas that are in our heads. But did you see this promise of a long life and prosperity? Now, for some people, they say, aha, therefore, if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, then you will have a long life, you'll be healthy, and you'll be prosperous, you'll be wealthy. Now, hear this. There isn't an instant promise in the Bible that everyone who obeys the Proverbs will be healthy and wealthy. In fact, the counterexample to this is another book in the Bible that's part of what's called the wisdom literature, and that's the book of Job. And the book of Job tells us that you can be someone who is wise and godly and yet still suffer, and the suffering is not due to your blame or your guilt. So it's not true that everyone who lives wisely will be always healthy and wealthy. Look at Jesus, the wisest person that's ever lived. He lived a short life and he suffered a lot. So what are we supposed to understand from this promise then? I guess it's saying, look, all other things being equal, if you are someone who's trying to obey the laws of the way the universe is put together, there's more chance that you will live a long and healthy life. But if you don't, you can't automatically assume that it's because you've been guilty of something. Do you remember the disciples? They were walking along and they see a blind man by the side of the road and they say, for whose sin is this man blind? Is it his sin or his parents' sins? And Jesus says, neither. In other words, we mustn't judge other people who are suffering, or even judge ourselves if we're suffering with sickness or bereavement, that people are being punished for not being faithful to the scriptures. That is not always the case. And again, those people that start judging God's hand in the coronavirus. I've read a few books that have said coronavirus is God's judgment on the world. I don't think that's true, and you shouldn't get that mindset from this book of Proverbs. Verse 3, let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. How about that? It's possible to be wise and yet unloving and unfaithful. People that make good, wise business decisions still might not be committed in their relationships. That's not God's intention, to give you a kind of cheat sheet for life so that you get to prosper. No, God is saying that wisdom is best understood within the context of loving, committed relationships. And it's going to take some work to do that. These proverbs are not just for our brains, they're for our hearts. We're supposed to wrap them around ourselves so that they form the kind of clothing or the way in which we live in the world. And then maybe you will know the next few verses. Then you will win favour and a good name in the sight of God and man. You will win favour and a good name in the sight of God and man. There's an integrity here. It matters what God thinks about us. That's surely our primary motivation in how we live. We want to honour God. It's God's approval of our life that matters most to us. But there is something about living in front of God according to his rules for the universe that will also give us standing in the sight of others. Think of Daniel. Daniel honoured God in the Bible, didn't he? But that led to him making wise decisions with his life. And, whether he ate food or not, whether he bowed down to idols or not, whether he prayed to a certain God or not, those things won him favour in the eyes of God and in other people. Same with Nehemiah. There's something about the way we live that will commend the goodness of God to other people. There's an integrity about our lifestyle. Maybe you will know these proverbs well. Verse 5, chapter 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your pathways straight. Trust in the Lord. Where? With your head? No, with your heart, with the central motivation of your life. That's one of our priorities here. We won't just base ourselves on how wise we've been. We'll commit our way to God. Wisdom is not supposed to be a separate source of wisdom is not supposed to be a separate source of confidence in the world. It's supposed to make us more reliant on God and what he says about us. And we'll acknowledge God not just in some of our ways, not just in our business dealings, not just on Sundays, but in everything we do. And as we do that, God will show us the way forward. He'll make our path straight. How about this? Verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. There's a form of wisdom that might puff you up, might think how great and intelligent you are. But actually, that's not the kind of wisdom that God's after. He's after a kind of wisdom that actually says, I'm about seeking God. I'm about putting God's priorities first. I'm about living in awe and fear of who God is. Verse 9, honour the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. So some people, because they feel they've made wise investments, or they've invested their energies or their work life so well, they've become wealthy, and therefore they think this is all mine, it's for me. And you might remember the rich fool in the New Testament. I think it's Luke chapter 12, who he has a bumper crop and he doesn't want to spend it in a profligate way. He decides to build a bigger barn to store his crops, so then he'll have a steady income into the future. But he is described not as a wise man, but as a foolish person, because he hasn't thought about other people. Godly wisdom will not lead to you hoarding the wealth that you've developed through your good decisions. Godly wisdom will lead to generosity. Honour the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. You're recognising in the way that you give that actually everything that you have is not from your own effort and intelligence. It's all a gift from God. It's another way this paradox comes together, that wisdom is something that we search for, we strive after, but it's a gift from God. It's the same with the accumulation of wealth. You might make great investments, you might choose to spend your money wisely, but even that ability comes from God, and therefore we need to honour him with how we live. Now, the Proverbs is actually full of little insights, little nuggets of truth that are worth burying in our hearts and minds. And generosity is one of those areas that comes up regularly. Have a look at Proverbs 28, verse 27. Those who give to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to them receive many curses. In other words, God says, look, because you've got stuff to give, because you've accumulated so much stuff, you could then think, well, this is all good for me. I'm just going to look after myself. But those who give to the poor, those who are generous, will lack nothing, because God gives to the giver. And but if you close your eyes, if you pretend there isn't a world of need out there, you are cursed by God. God does not back you, even though you might feel wealthy. How about this one? People curse the one who hoards grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to sell. Proverbs 11:26. We live in a culture that when the virus came, the pandemic and the lockdown arrived, people wanted to hoard so much. But actually that's opposed to God's means. He doesn't want us to be hoarders. He wants us to be blessing others. But he's also saying how other people will perceive us. If you hoard, you are cursed by others. Think how we shame those people that grabbed all the toilet roll or had fights in the middle of supermarkets. People will curse those who hoard grain, but they pray God's blessing on the one who is willing to sell. There's a sense of public reputation again. And again, this is an idea that comes up all the time. As we live well and generously in front of a watching world, that honours God, but it honours the people of God in the eyes of others. How about this one? Proverbs 17:5. Whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. There's a kind of TV show that you might see called Benefit Street, which seems to mock people who are poor, make them feel bad about who they are. That is not a godly attitude. That's to oppose God, our maker. Whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Why? Because every single human being is made in the image of God. Whether you're rich or poor, wise or foolish, every single human being is made in the image of God. And how we treat the poor is an indicator of how we feel about the one who made them. And therefore this verse is such a challenge to us not to have haughty or self-absorbed view of ourselves, but instead to recognize the value in others and not mock them or deride them, but to help lift them up, honor them, so that we might honor our maker. The generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Proverbs 22 verse 9. Do you see how in the book of Proverbs there's a way of living, a wise way of living, that is not the same as the wisdom of the world. The wisdom of the world says you've made it through your own graft. You've fought the elemental forces and you've made your way in the world. But in the Bible it says no, you have become wise because of the gift of God, and therefore you have been blessed. Wise people make wise investments. They tend to be able to keep money together, have good jobs, have a good reputation, but that doesn't puff us up. That makes us more appreciative of the grace and generosity of God. And because we have that, we're able to pass it on to other people. A wise person is not a hoarder. They are generous to those that are in need, out of a sense of honour and gratitude to the God who has given everything that we need. We see that in the life of Jesus, that he is the most blessed and wisest person on the planet, and yet he is the most generous person you've ever met. Friends, there is a link between wisdom and generosity. It's a lesson I'm trying to learn day by day. I am not a wise person. I'm not a generous person, but that's something I want to be. And I hope these proverbs that have challenged me will challenge you. Friends, go have a fantastic day. Trust in the Lord your God with all your heart. Commit your way to him. He will make your pathway straight. Look forward to seeing you again soon in the FAQ.